Good morning and welcome back to Plannercraft. I'm Natalie and I'm going to be taking you through a little bit of a tutorial with some new stamps and some design templates from Pretty Gets Gritty. So today we are on the Crafting with Pretty Gets Gritty group. We're also on my group and my page, and you can also watch along on YouTube and on Twitch. So morning Tracy, morning Deb. And if you're watching on Facebook and you haven't already signed in, I can't see your names unfortunately. So if you go to the link that I'm sure Tracy will put up shortly, then you can actually log in. So morning Carol. So today I'm going to be working with a fairly limited palette, but I wanted to have lots of different types of goodies that we can play with. And morning Lynette. So we're going to be working with a pink, a lime and a kind of turquoise colour. So in Distress Oxides I've got picked raspberry, twisted citron and peacock feathers, and then I've pulled out the same in clean colour brushes and also some coloured fine liners. So if you do have any questions at any point, don't be afraid to ask. There's about a 30-second delay between when I'm doing something and when you're seeing it. Oh dear, Tracy's forgotten the link. Oh well. So I have some A6 smooth card that I'm going to be working with today. With a lot of the samples I was using mixed media cards, so I thought it would be good to have a change. And I thought it would be fun today to try and do a few different techniques looking at things like stippling with the design templates and things like that. So I'm going to start off with one of the biggest stamps in the collection, and this one's one of my favourites, and you can tell I use it a lot. Okay, I'm going to pop that onto my card where I want it, and I'm going to close my stamp platform. And today I'm using a hybrid black ink, but anything that is kind of water resistant will be good. So I'm focusing mainly on techniques today, so we won't be doing finished cards as such, but you'll have lots of toppers that you can go ahead and use after. Oh, there we go. Okay, so now that we've stamped our image, one of the joys of using the design templates is that we can actually start to work back into these, possibly adding more detail with some of the smaller worker stamps, so that we can actually fill our designs out to fill a certain shape. But I'm going to just go with a nice circle to get started with. So if I bring in my moon template, because this is slightly bigger than the normal circle template that we're using, I'm just going to bring that in so that we're starting to get kind of a little aperture design going on in here. Now at this point you could use a black ink liner, or you could go for the colour. So I'm going to start to introduce the colour in, and let's go for a nice turquoise fine liner. So when we're using our drawing templates, we can actually use our stamp platform to help us a little bit. So I'm just going to line up where I want my template and pop some magnets on just to help me a little. I'm going to trace around the outside edge. Whoop, don't slip. Ever have the feeling it's one of those days today? There we go. I want to go round in between, so I'm going to follow my design round, and anywhere where there's a little gap I'm just going to fill in. So just here, I'm going to fill in a little bit there, take that round to about there, so that we've got our start of our circle. Then I'm going to move this round. Don't worry about your dots just yet. So you don't have to use the dots if you don't want to. But I'm going to do a few in a minute, but in a different colour. Okay. So I'm just going to hold that there. So there's the start of our little circle. Well, not so little. So now I'm going to change pen. And I'm going to go to the pink. Now, as I said, I'm going to do some of the dots, but not all of the dots. So I'm just going to pick a few, going around the outside. There we go. So this is where we can start to use our templates to actually doodle back into our designs. We can use them to add borders, so if you want to sit your design on a border, you could do. So if you wanted to do a repeat border that way, or we can just take it so that we're going to bring that border down this way. Now, ideally, you want to keep that as vertical as possible. So if you have a set square or a T-ruler, then you can use that to help you place your line. And this time I'm going to go to the green. The link is chat.restream.io/FB. So I'm just going to trace around the outside. I'm not going to worry about filling it in. And when I've done that there, I'm going to try and move that down so that we try and keep it in line. As much as possible. And you're looking at this bottom edge here as well. Okay, so about there. And again, I'm going to draw around that line, but I'm going to stop when I get to my stamped image. And again, outline those shapes around, like so. So we've started to build up a bit of a background for our stamp to sit on. And then we can start to do a little bit doodling inside. And when you do get your drawing templates, yours will look a bit different to mine. Mine are kind of prototypes. Okay, so I'm just going to do a little bit of a diagonal pattern. Let's see if I can zoom in a bit for you so you can see that a little bit better. So rather than just filling it in a solid colour, we're kind of hatching that space. Let's put that back there. There we go. So I'm going to do the same for each of those long rectangles. So now that we've got those elements in, we can start to look at our stamping and think, are there spaces that we think would look better if we actually extended them a little bit? So if we look in the same stamp sheet, you've got a smaller version of the same design. You've also got two smaller images that you could actually use to just extend it at the ends if you just need that little bit extra. But I think on this one I'm pretty happy at that. Yeah. So, onwards with the colouring. So you could keep it nice and simple and go tones of grey at this point, but I'm going to go a little bit brighter than that because it's starting to look a little bit fun. So may as well go with it. So the colour I am using is pale green, for those of you that have the clean colour brushes. If you haven't got one that's pale enough, you can just do a little stroke and then blend it out with some water. The card I'm using is super smooth, so I'm not going to use too much water on it. And I'm going to use that same colour over here. So one of the things I'll often do with these is try and match them tonally to each other, so it actually looks like you've got distinctively different plants. So in the same jar I've got a darker green, brush has gone a bit dry. You can say hello, I'll let you. Yeah.
Hello peeps.
Yeah, my brush is misbehaving today. There we go. That one's a bit more wet, that one.
Bit more soggy.
Yeah.
I'll leave you in peace. I'm keeping an ear out for the door.
Yeah.
There you go.
Have you looked? So if you're new to the channel, Ian used to do a lot of the streaming with me, but he's got himself a day job now, so he can't always come on stream. So I'm just going to blend that down. And we can always go back in and add a bit of the blue where we need some extra shading. Which I would probably do with these smaller little leaves. So the colour that I'm using now is turquoise green. Just put a little bit on these because they'll be a bit more out in the open. And then do these a slightly different way around. Just so we're getting as many tones of green out of our pens as possible. So you don't need to have lots and lots of different pens. That's just me. Okay, so next I'm going to go and colour in my flowers. Now, just because I'm going to do this a little bit more subtle than what these colours are going to allow me, I'm going to scribble a little bit on my stamping platform. Now, pink on pink is never going to be a good idea for you to be able to see that, but I do apologise. If I pop a bit of white card underneath, you'll be able to see a little bit better. So you can see that pink is really quite vivid compared to our ink pad, so I'm just going to knock it back a little bit. And I'm kind of pulling a little bit that warmer pink in. If you find your brush is getting a bit too wet, which mine is, I'm just going to blot it slightly. Just because I don't want to puddle it too much on my actual image. I'm just going to apply that straight to my card. Pick up a little bit of that darker pink, and I'm just going to drop that in and just let it do its thing. So I'm going to do the same for the little flower bud up here. Just pop a little bit of that darker colour in to one side. Then we can start to look at some of the other elements, but if we want them to have that kind of green tone so that our flower stays prominent, and then your green is going to recede, or if you want to bring some of that pink through. So I'm just going to stick with that same light colour, and I'm just going to go into our little flower heads. Like so. Okay. Let's go back to that pale green and just do these bits in here. So I'm going to try and get through as many different things that we can do with these as possible, but I'm going to try and stick to a good time limit, which is never good when it comes to me. Yes, you can use the Arteza brush pens exactly the same way. So if you have the Arteza ones, I will try and find the matching colours for you, and I'll pop them up on my group with a photograph so you can tell which one's which, because mine seem to be missing the numbers. So, next card. I'm just going to leave that other card piece underneath just so I remember to clean that in a minute. So I'm going to pop that one about there, and I want to leave myself plenty of room so that I can do the next technique. Okay, so I'm going to go for a bit of a colourful one this time. So I'm going to stamp with my oxides. Okay. Now I'm going to ink my stamp up again. Let's just move that camera slightly out so you can see a little bit better. And sitting off to one side very patiently, I have a little gel plate. So I'm going to stamp that onto there. And this may be a bit too pale, so let's try that again. I'll stamp it onto the back of this piece just to check. Yeah, it's a little bit too pale, so let's go for a bit of a heavier inking. Okay. I'm going to twizzle that round, and I'm going to stamp again. So I'm looking at where that leaf finishes, and I'm going to have to move that magnet out of my way for a minute. So I'm going to get kind of an arch effect going on. Okay, there we go. So it's a nice easy way of doing a mirror stamp. So I'm going to turn this round this way now, so you can see where we're aiming. And if you haven't got it quite centered or anything, don't worry, you can always just trim it off after. Just when we're going back in with our drawing templates, make sure that you stay square to the image rather than the card. So I'm going to use the little dash template this time. And let's use one of our fine liners. So I'm going to go for 0.3, and I'm just looking at the tips of these here so that I can get that centered as possible, and looking at the gap between these two here. As I said, we can always then trim it up after. So by doing our middle section first, that means that we can get it nicely centered and then work outwards. So I want to show you some stippling techniques in a minute. I'm going to finish this off first. I'm going to move this so my line extends off the end. And the same with the other end. A little bit further. There we go. So that's how we can create an arch with our stamps. And then use that for a sentiment. So let's pick a nice sentiment to go in the middle. That one's a little bit too big, so I'm going to go for something a little bit smaller. Ooh, that one's a bit too big, but I think if I stamp it in black, it should show up enough. So again, make sure that if this line's wonky here, try and match that same wonkiness, if that's even a word, for your sentiment. Let's take that stamp off. I'll give it a good clean in a minute. Press that down, and again I'm going to go back to my hybrid ink. There we go. What you can do while you're colouring this is actually consciously keep like a glow around your text. So keep it nice and soft, don't have like a hard line, so that you can still see that text easily. Okay. So I want to show you some stippling effects, and for that I'm going to go for something a little bit bolder. as an image. So usually what I do in my lives is I will go away at the end and finish these all off and make them into a card, and then I pop them up on the group, on the page and on our Instagram, so you can see how they all come together in the end. So I'm going to start off with this image in the middle. And with the drawing template, I tend to find it's easier to stamp first than draw after. I'm just going to stamp 2 or 3 times because I want a nice bold image. And this one's where you're going to want to start to play with different nib widths. So I've pulled out a whole set of fine liners, so I can go everything from a 1mm to a brush right down to a 0.05. And let's go for what I love is the ability to go, actually, let's change plan and go that one, or that one. Maybe that one. Yeah, let's go for that. I'm liking that. So I'm going to start off with a nice, bold fine liner. So let's look for the 0.8. I'll line that back up in a minute. That'll do. Go for the 1 because that's going to be the one that's coming out first. There we go. So I'm lined up my triangle so that I've got this kind of gap between the bottom of my flowers here. And again, we can always retrim our card base if need be. I'm going to take that down there, across there, up there. Now we can go to a smaller pen. Yeah. And I'm just going to dot, so I'm not going to draw around the circle this time. Just literally dot. So I'm using it as a kind of spacer, but I'm not limiting myself to it being that big. This is always a good one on the eyesight because it's right where the light hits. Just going to shade that slightly, but you'll see what I've done when I lift off the stencil. Just makes it a little bit easier on my eyes. Okay, so now that I've done that one, I'm going to use one of the other triangles. I'm going to turn it upside down, like so. And I'm placing it so it's going to interact with our flower. Let's go for a nice thin one this time, so I'm going to try and match that stamped out line. So this is the 0.05. I'm not going to do the dots on this one, but I'm going to move to a different shape. So let's go for a circle. And I'm taking this past the edge of that triangle. Now you have a few options here at this point. You could draw that circle in its entirety and then work with the shape that you create outside of your triangle. You could stop at that edge. Lynette can probably answer that one, Carol, as to what the templates and how much they are. If she hasn't done so already. I've got a bit of a pop-up going on, which is a bit annoying. So I'm going to take it up to that edge. And again, I'm going to try and miss my stamped image. So now we have the basis for our design. We could use these shapes to pick out colour areas. So for instance, we might want to keep our background black and white, but then add a real burst of colour in this circle here. But I want to show you a little bit on stippling. So stippling is where we use dots to shade, and we can use different size dots. So if you want to use your different pens, you can use that. And also the spaces between the dots are going to help you shade too. So where you're darkest, you're going to want to keep those dots fairly close together. And as you start to fade out, you're going to space those apart. Okay, so I'm going to start in this little tight section up here, and I'm just going to do some little dots. So I'm using quite a bold pen, so you can see this quite clearly, especially if I zoom in a bit. There you go. There. So as I'm moving out, there's going to start to be more and more space between our dots, and that's going to create the impression that we're using shading throughout that section. We can do the same from this corner. So close it together, then as we move outwards, we're going to start increasing those spaces so that we can start to shade our designs. So if we're looking at a tattoo, for instance, or something like that, where you've only got either on or off, essentially, then that is how we do our shading. Now obviously normally you would do that with a much finer point, but so you can see where the dots are nice and clearly, it's good to do it with a thicker pen as we're learning the skill, and then you can start to get finer and finer. Now what I would say is when you're doing your dots, particularly if you're doing a large area, look after your wrist, keep it nice and relaxed, and try not to press too much into the paper. That's going to help you avoid too much of an injury on your wrist. So there's a brilliant TED talk on embracing the shake, and the artist behind that actually started off by doing lots of pointillism work, but he's had to learn to embrace his shake from doing it. Okay. And we can do the same in this corner here. So start to get a bit more spaced out. And you don't necessarily have to do it really neat. We can go a bit more haphazard if you want to. As you get more used to doing it, you'll start to see, okay, I'm going to want to go a bit more random over here. So you're getting spaced out more and more, like so. So now I'm going to take my pen, I'm going to colour in that triangle that we drew. So one of the things I've loved about working with this collection is that ability to just play and doodle. It's kind of got me a little bit hooked, I have to say. Okay, so like I was saying, we can use that colour, or that circle, to kind of make a section pop. Morning, Linda. Hi, Sharon. So I'm going to start to pull out some of these colours. So one of the final techniques I want to show you is a little bit on how we can stencil with our drawing templates too. So let's just go around the outside edge with some of the turquoise colour. So with your paper, what you'll find is your brushes and pens will actually start to colour differently between them. So some will move more than others. So the card I'm using is just super smooth stamping card at the moment. So it's not really meant for lots of watercolour. But as I said, a lot of my samples I've used mixed media card on. So I was trying to do something a little bit different today. Okay. Not doing too bad for time. I'm quite impressed with that today. Usually I find the time whizzes by and I suddenly turn around and go, oh, it's lunchtime. Okay, so I'm just going to do a little bit more around the edge just to blend it a little. Okay, one last little technique. So what I've done is I've taken my drawing template and I've actually created some masks from it. So I'm going to pick out the diamond. And let's choose a nice stencil to work with. So let's pull out one of the designs from the Indian summer. And this is where we can start to create a background for our stamps to sit into. So I've put my design stencil at the bottom and then my masking shape on top. I'm going to pop a magnet right in the middle. Okay. Now the stronger that magnet is, depending on your stamp platform, the more it's going to hold. And I'm going to grab a blending brush. And let's grab the peacock feathers. I'm just going to press and hold that magnet just because I know that mine's a little bit loose on here. And I'm going to be quite subtle with my stenciling to start with. I always find that with stenciling you've actually transferred far more ink than you think. So I tend to be quite subtle with it. So the advantage of using this technique with a detailed mask like this is it does actually give you somewhere to hold on to it, that you don't have to worry too much about it shifting. So Darcy's asking which pens am I using. The fine liners are from Ohuhu, and they are pretty watercolour and alcohol friendly, so they don't tend to bleed with either. One of the reasons why I like using them for this technique, so that I don't have to worry about what I'm going to colour with. Excuse my hand for a minute, just while I get this last little bit. The brush pens are Clean Colour Real Brush Pens by Kuretake, and the colour fine liners are the Arteza Inconyx. Okay, so I'm just going to very carefully remove these, and you'll see we've got a diamond left behind. So now at this point we can come back in with our template, and I'm going to use the blue fine liner for this, I think. So if you have the Inconyx, it's A208. I'm just going to trace around that edge. And you can do this much more carefully than what I'm able to do it today. Let's go for I want to use a set that I haven't seen yet this morning. Let's go for that one. So I'm going to bring this one in. I do clean my stamps, I promise. There we go. Just pick that one up. And I'm going to ink this up in the peacock feathers again. Okay. That's how we can stencil with our design. And if you want to do the same technique but with the jelly plate, you can do. And I take it Mum's hopped on. Sorry Mum, I miss you saying hi. So, let's grab our jelly plate. I'm going to grab my stencil, place that over the top. Now it's not going to quite fit on here, but I'm going to line it up so I have as much missing at either end, if that makes sense. Let's go for the line. Move that on there a little bit so he's fighting with me. I'm going to ink up through my stencil. peel that off. I won't waste that ink, so I can use it on something else in a minute. And I can place that over the top. And we have a nice easy way of colouring our design. So let's work into that now. Let's go with this one. So I'm going to go straight into here. And pull that colour out. So because our oxides are water reactive, we're going to get some different effects. And those will vary by paper. There we go. Add a little bit more of that green, just pick up those leaves, and then we can trim into that, and another job done. So by using that technique with the jelly plate, it's a nice quick way of doing some colouring. And I'm afraid for today I'm going to have to leave you there. So goodbye for now.